everyone. Welcome to the Flippin' the Barrel podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of energy leaders across our industry and find out more about their career and life journey. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Molly Determan. She is the president of the Energy Workforce and Technology Council. Molly is a leader in the development and management of the association's strategy and activities to promote the energy services and technology sector of the oil and gas industry. Molly advocates on behalf of the energy workforce and speaks frequently on workforce, culture, leadership, HSE, and supply chain. And not to mention, she was at our recent event and spoke on DE&I, which we were so excited to have Molly there. And more importantly, just her advice was incredible. She's very experienced in the space and very in touch with what's going on in all the organizations. She was also named E&P Magazine 40 Under 40 honoree in 2021 and HBJ's Women Who Mean Business Award in 2023. Molly, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again for spending the time with us at the event back in July.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Y'all did such a great job. I mean, y'all do such a great job on those events. So appreciate being able to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was really incredible to finally have you there in person, and not to mention just be able to experience what it was like with you now as president of the energy technology workforce. So really exciting. And a lot of people, I don't feel like they probably know where you came from, because I know that was one thing. I've known you for a while. I knew Leslie, but I had no idea your background, it's very interesting background. It's very different than a lot of people we've ever had on the podcast. So I want to start with just where you grew up. So you grew up on the coast of Alabama, and your parents really kind of influenced your career choices and your perspective on life and work. And I thought it was really interesting when you had mentioned that you even decided to take up journalism and learn German. Of all of the languages, it just seemed like a very interesting one to choose. Tell us what it was like living in Alabama, and also how your mom helped influence the direction that you would go in your career.
Yeah, thanks. So I mean, yes, my parents very heavily influenced, my life and my trajectory, as I think most do. But my mom was a math teacher. My dad was an artist turned small business owner. And he had taken over my mom's family's business. And so it was really very much like a family oriented business that we were all kind of involved and aware of and like part of. And so learned a lot from that experience about like the importance of networking. And both my parents really believe firmly in getting involved in your community beyond yourself. So that was like kind of some of the things that they taught me, but like naturally, like my skills were in writing and communications and like building relationships. So when it was, time for me to graduate from high school, I wanted to go to college. And so my mom kind of sat me down with a career book and was like, all right, if you want to go to college, what do you want to study? We're not just like going to college to go to college. And so it's like, all right, fair point. So we went through the book, and we were like flipping through, and I was like, interior design looks like fun. I don't know, that could be fun. And so she made me look at the annual salary, and it was anywhere from 1,000 to 100,000 annually is the average salary. And I said, Mom, I think that I could survive off of 100,000 a year, because obviously, like, I would make the top salary always.
Yes, of
And
course.
she was like, ma'am, try again. Uh,
I love that.
and so she got me over to like looking at journalism, and like I was like,
Mhm.
oh yes, this resonates, like writing and all of that makes sense. But I wanted to also study international relations.
Mm.
And when she had asked me like what you do in a job with international relations, I didn't have an answer. But when I went off to college, like you have to study a language, and I'd already studied German in middle school and high school. And so at that point, it's like, well, obviously, like you keep on with German. And so I got her back and added German as a major. So I have a degree in that also. So there we go. Don't use it, but I do speak it to my daughter at home.
I love it. So tell me a little bit about, you spent the year in Germany. You studied abroad. You really and were able to experience not just the language, but also the culture there. And then you returned back to the US, and you started working in sales. But I remember you talking about how when you were in Alabama, it was really difficult to find a kind of job that fit like the PR and the journalism and what you were trying to do. And a lot of it had to deal with nonprofits.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a bit about that transition when you worked for AT&T, but then also how you were able to get into nonprofits and what the difference was when you're working like in a corporate environment where
Yeah.
and then like a nonprofit environment?
I had a great mentor that I interned with when I was in college, and when I was interning in PR, and she had said, when you go and you look for your first job in PR, don't worry too much about what it actually is. Like, people just want to see that you get 2 years of experience. And so I took a marketing job in telecom when I first got out, and as it turns out, marketing was sales. I didn't know that, but anyways, it's cool. It was a great experience. I didn't worry too much about it, and so then I was laid off when they laid off 25% of the company. I was involved in that, and I had been successful enough that, like, I had companies calling me and being like, "Why don't you come work for us in sales?" And I was like, "That's not actually what I wanna do."
Hmm.
And so I took that time to, like, be like, "Okay, I have 2 years of experience." I was told, "With 2 years of experience, I can get a PR job." And so, just, like, held firm on waiting until the right opportunity came up. And so an opportunity came up at the Girl Scouts, and, so, like, going from corporate to nonprofit, I made less money. That was one thing, that was one difference. But for me, it really, like, resonated because, um, I felt, like, very driven by working for a mission-driven and a member-driven organization.
Mhm.
And so for me, making less money was okay because I felt really fulfilled. Also in a nonprofit, there's also always, like, not enough staff members, and so you can jump in and really get your hands involved in a lot of things, and I like that. I like to have my hands on, I like to be able to make change, and so that is a great thing about working for a nonprofit.
And you did spend about 6 years at the Girl Scouts, and
Yeah.
when for people that don't know, what is like, when you say PR and journalism and these terms, what exactly is that type of role? Like, what are you doing, and, like, what were you able to impact while at Girl Scouts, for
Yeah,
instance?
so, doing PR, there's a lot, and there was also marketing too. There was a lot on, like, doing the media and press relations, getting, Girl Scouts out and in front of communities, the communities where they worked. Also overseeing the branding, and making sure that the Girl Scout brand was, like, consistent and steady throughout all of the volunteers, and that it was reflected the way that it needed to be. That the things that we were messaging on, like those types of initiatives, were things that we were involved in. So
No, that's very interesting. And what I find really cool about your story is you gained this experience and then you thought, you know what, after leaving Girl Scouts, you're like, you know what, I'm going to start my own PR company. I mean, I can do this on my own. And what did you find the most challenging, and what made you decide to go the entrepreneur route? Because it's
yeah,
a lot, it's very demanding. It's just you, right? So you don't have anybody else to fall back on.
for sure.
And did you have any connections at the time that were helping push you to make this decision? Because most of the time you don't just do it blindly. It's usually you have these outside resources that are telling you like, "Hey, I really think you should
Yeah.
do this. Hey, I'll follow you." Is that what you were experiencing?
Yeah, so I have been really involved in a civic organization called Rotary International, and that's a group of it's usually small business leaders. And
Mhm.
so those small business leaders saw that they were like, you've really outgrown the Girl Scouts. Like you've kind of done as much as you can do there, and we want you to work for our organizations. And they were telling me this like individually. And I had enough companies that came up and were like, I would like for you to work for my company, but I can't hire you full time. So
Mhm.
if you left the Girl Scouts, I would hire you, but not full time and for contract work. And so I had enough of those people coming to me and saying that I was like, all right, I feel like I can do this. And I
Mhm.
had, obviously a background in like caring about small businesses. And so that I was like, all right, I would like to help these companies. And so I went out and I did it. It was the scariest thing that I'd done in my life up to that point. But those companies were there, and they hired me, and then I brought on additional companies, and started working for some OFS companies, and that's where I started learning about the oil and gas industry, and specifically OFS, and like I was like, oh, this is a really great industry. Like I love this.
So that's where I find it really interesting. So Girl Scouts to then you did entrepreneurship, ran your own PR, and then all of a sudden it's like oil and gas.
Yes.
Were these people like part of the community and they just happened to work in oil and gas and then you got pulled in that way? Is that kind of how that worked? Was it and
Yeah.
what kind of advice do you have for those that are trying to build those relationships in order to get an opportunity like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, those were made through connections that I made networking, and I'm a very strong believer in that, like the importance of giving back to your community, and you get a really strong network in that way, and it is a network built on like everybody wanting to invest in the community. And so I wasn't entering into these relationships saying, hey, hire me to do PR.
Mhm.
It was, we were working together in the community. They saw the types of things I could do PR wise in my volunteer work, and that translated into business. And so I think that because I hadn't come after them in a sales way, or what can I do for me right now in this moment, in entering into those relationships, I feel like that they were so much more fruitful.
And I think that you really hit the nail on the head because it's about building a relationship that's not centered around what you're going to get out of it. And so you really focused on also the initiative between what y'all all were trying to do, which better the community, and especially being a part of when you were part of Girl Scouts, just better that entire community and all those little girls. And when you
Mhm.
share that passion, you then it's kind of like you're already accepted into that crowd.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us about your experience because how did you discover at the time it was PISA? So you were, doing your own thing, you had all these other companies you were working for, and then you had this opportunity with PISA and you chose to work for that company rather than continue your own business. What aspects of running your own business did you find less appealing, and how did working for a company better align with your career progression? Because, right now, if you look at Instagram and social media, it's all about work for yourself.
Yeah.
That's the best. And everybody always thinks that they're doing it wrong if they are working for someone else, which I think that you can probably attest that that's not true.
It's true. It's funny that you say that because when I decided to go work for PISA, one of the people that I worked with or worked for, he was very disappointed in me. And he told me, he said, I can't believe you're giving this up. Like, like this was your path to success. And I was like, I believe in a lot of paths to success. I believe I was successful in that. And I believe I'll be successful working for an organization, and I'll be happy in that. The thing I didn't like about working independently was that you had to price your worth. And so for every single project that you're working with these companies on, you're having to say, okay, this is the number of hours it's going to take, and this is how much I'm going to charge you. And nobody ever took issue with what I was charging, but I hated that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather just go and work for an organization and know what salary I'm going to make and not have to worry about like charging people that. So that's ultimately like what drove me out of that. But then the opportunity at Pisa was like the perfect combination of like I'd just gotten to know the OFS sector and my background in nonprofit management. So
Mhm.
it was a very easy transition.
No, that sounds it sounds exactly like how I envision entrepreneurship as well is, you're having to price the work that you're doing. And sometimes it's just nice to know at the end of the day what you're getting paid and that, the company has been around and they kind of know what the worth is of, the
Mhm. Mhm.
services.
Yeah.
So I definitely can relate to that feeling. So you ended up spending 11 years at PISA, rising all the way to the vice president of communications and marketing to now president. Within those 11 years, y'all did a lot of substantial changes. You rebranded, you got Leslie as a new CEO at one point, and then she then left, and then you were given the role as president, which was an incredible honor. But
Mhm.
what did you do during that time, do you think that set you apart from the rest of the organization? And how did you help with that rebranding experience? Because I know that can be very difficult.
So on the rebranding side, that it was difficult. But I think the entire board understood and wanted the organization to rebrand. And so individually, then when it came, to the point of rebranding, and we went through, I've been through 2 rebrandings with the organization, and when we went through both of those, individually, like, people will feel like they don't wanna let go of what they were used to seeing or what they were used to calling it,
Mhm,
um, but they as long as the main most of the stakeholders are on board and will advocate for the change that you're making, that helps smooth the way for it. Uh,
mhm.
but change can be hard. Uh, what was the other question?
While you were doing that, what were some
Oh,
experiences that
sorry.
you had? Like, and what were some challenges? Because y'all, how many companies do you represent
It's
currently?
over 300 companies. And so I think, to the kind of question about like how did I set myself apart during the 11 years, I think that I am someone that I always want to grow and I always want to like do better for the organization. And so I think that that's a combination, like, um, that has always translated to career growth for me,
Mhm,
because I'm always trying to do more for the organization in a way that benefits the organization, and then that does come back and benefit me, but that's not the reason why I'm trying to benefit the organization.
mhm,
And so I think when you're in it for the right reason and you're focused on the organization, then the good things follow, and I hope that they do, right? That's been my case. I know that might not always, but that has been that has worked for me. And I think too, like, also back to the point about networking, like, building those relationships and people that will advocate for you, um, is really helpful.
And going just because I just find it so interesting when y'all did rebrand, because we were a part of, y'all supported Flip in the Barrel way back when we first started 5 years ago. And you were a PISA at the time. And so even for us, we were like trying to remember, okay, it's energy technology work for like, what is it
What
now?
is it?
Um, did you did y'all have to overcome any hurdles? Because like you have 300 members, you represent all
Yeah.
these OFS service companies, and now you're going to them saying like, "Hey, we're doing this whole rebrand, this whole rename." Did you have any trouble with the existing branch, and then also, trying to get new members kind of confused about who y'all were now? And if not, what do you think you did right in order to make that transition?
Yeah, I think less so with new members coming in, but with the existing members, I think what helped people get on board was we very had a very clear story behind why. And it wasn't like, we just kind of threw a dart at the board and we're like, now love it or leave it. It was like, this is um, who we represent and the energy workforce. And then technology is what our sector does and what they're known for. And so we're not used to saying it, it's a mouthful until you get used to saying it, but the people understand why. And also they understand that changing the name, in that instance, when we changed the name, um, really helped us to um, be able to meet with members of Congress when we're doing our clients. Um, and very quickly, they know coming in what it is we're representing. Um, and also it's more representative of all of our members and our aspirational goals of like who we want to be and where we want to go.
I think that's so true. You know what that reminds me of when I'm driving down the road and I'm looking for restaurants and I'm like, why did you call that restaurant that name? I have no idea what you're serving. So if you're going to Congress and it's a difficult understanding of correlation between like who you're representing because of the name, I think
Yeah.
you're 100% correct. Like Energy Workforce Technology Council is very clear in what y'all are doing.
Yes.
So that takes me into my next question, which is around when we look at the next generation and who's coming and also like the attrition and like what we're losing, especially on the oil field service side. What kind of plans have y'all put into place to help the organizations retain talent and then also be able to compete with the digital world and everybody interested in Google and Amazon? And even though I feel like the energy workforce has the best opportunity and we do the coolest things, it's really hard sometimes to get that messaging out there correctly.
It's true. You're very right. And so that is something that we are always focused on. And I would say there's two ways. So internally, within our organizations, our companies helped us to build a leadership training that goes from the field to the C-suite. And I think that the focus on the leadership development for the field and the shop floor has been something that is really, really like been beneficial to our companies because it's hard enough to bring people into our companies, but once we bring them in, we want to be able to hang on to them. And
Mhm.
so that leadership development at that level is what that's about. Like how to be a good boss because people leave organizations when they have a boss that they can't stand, right? That's one of the reasons. And so we want to help empower people to be better bosses. Then externally, like talking about messaging, I mean, we have our work cut out for us. And it's really great to have organizations like Flipping the Barrel that are also doing this because the more voices, the better on talking about what our industry really is. And what it isn't, and that this is an industry that's going to be around for a long time, and it is also an industry that continues to adapt. And so I think that that's not necessarily what people know about the oil and gas industry from the outside looking in. And so the more that we can reach outside of our, organizations, the better.
Mhm.
And so we do a lot of work on that with our members and also empowering the 650,000 men and women that we represent to be ambassadors for the industry as well and feel comfortable talking about the industry that they work in.
I think that's so important. And on that note, talking about feeling comfortable about just talking about not the industry they work in, but also all the things that we struggle with. Especially as women in the industry, we're always trying to flip in the barrel, promote more women to join us because we've had such great careers, but more importantly, we feel very well supported by the organizations. That's a reason why we started, our women's event, Pursuing Greatness. And on that event, we make sure to talk about the things that we all struggle with. And more importantly, in your career trajectory, how were you able to balance the role of motherhood and
Yeah,
trying to
yeah, no,
expand in your
I mean,
career.
it's hard. Then it's also hard, like having young children and like wanting to have the same pace at your work, and like at the same time, you like have to let go of certain things. And so I think in some ways, going through all of that has made me a better leader because I can't grip things as tightly as I wanted to.
Mhm.
I had to be a better delegator, and I had to trust in other people more, than I had, and that allowed me to, like, even grow beyond where I was, because I wasn't getting as stuck in the minutia. But I think, you know, there's so many, I mean, just life is hard. There's so many things that come up, and I think that the more that, like, we can recognize that everybody has struggles, and if we can be respectful as people and organizations to see that and support it when it's going on, and not be afraid to talk about it. Because I think that that's been a thing, is that people are afraid to talk about, like, personal things.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's a myth. I feel like then, you know, how are we supposed to, like, grow through it, feel supported, and, grow together if we're not talking about things?
No, I fully agree. And I really appreciate you opening up and even allowing us to ask that kind of question because it is important for us to talk about it. And then with the initiatives that y'all are doing, are you working on anything to help support women in the field or support women in the organizations? Do y'all have any resources for the companies that join on maternity leave and what maternity leave should look like across the companies for competitiveness? I think all those are really key to, to your point, protecting women in the organization, but also protecting their mental health to know that they do have time off. They will be able to have that moment that they need for parental leave and including the men as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, yes, we do have resources, and we have a great people and culture committee, that I just think the world of, because they have developed a lot of best practices and industry guidelines around things like this, and then they update as the industry adapts, and are willing to share that with each other who are or their competitors.
Mhm.
Um, so, they when there was first like parental leave, they started sharing like some guidelines and best practices around that, and now they've shared, you know, guidance around the move towards just like personal leave, whenever you have something that happens in your life, in addition to like protecting like maternal and paternal leave, but
Mhm.
also like as you have aging parents, or you have a situation with your dog or something where you need to go out, like if it's important to you, having that
Mhm.
flexibility and knowing that your company will support you in that, um, is great. They do have a lot of um, other resources that they're sharing on, and I just appreciate how they are willing to come in and share real time, like, because these things, I feel like they adapt, they
Mhm.
change quickly, like, and so if we just, like, put something out a few years ago, it's not gonna be as relevant today.
I find that so true. And I know with every experience, that's where it should evolve. I know with my personal experience, it was the first time for the company I was working with to ever have that experience of a salesperson also in
Yeah,
the NICU and all of that. And so that first time experience for them allowed them to evolve that policy. And so I believe that if we can have those kind of shared resources and they can come to the table in your organization and say, I experienced this, and this is what I think we should do to support our employees moving forward. It helps not just their organization, but the entire industry. So I love that y'all are doing that.
thank you.
And then to close, I'd really like to hear from you on, we have a ton of listeners. They range from, in high school, college to senior level executives. What kind of advice do you have that you have learned in your career that maybe something that if you were looking back, you'd be like, oh, Molly, if you only knew, do you have anything you could share with us that maybe somebody could take today and really utilize moving forward, both in their professional and personal lives?
I mean, I was just thinking about like what you're talking about with the like how we help women advance. And I think that one area that I consistently see, and I see it for myself too, um, in particular when it comes to women, is that we um, want to make sure that we know everything or that we have like the absolute like perfect setup before we agree to do something.
Mhm.
Like we do not want to commit to things unless like we know that like we can nail it or we have the all the time. And I have seen from guys not as much. They're like they might not know anything about it, but they'll sign up whatever if you ask them to do it. They're and they'll get in, they'll do it great. And so but I feel like um we need women to step into leadership roles before they're ready, before they feel ready.
Mhm.
Um, because you're never going to be fully ready, right? You'll learn as you get there. And so we also um, need to like take more chances, like not feel like you have to know everything before you get in.
I love that. It reminds me of also the advice that we try to give young women too. It's like you're never going to have a perfect career spot where you want to have children either. Like you're never going to be ready. It's the same thing and then you take on that challenge and you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, but you do it and every woman's successful. So if you were
Yeah.
to take that into your career and know that, hey, I have no idea, but I'm going to try it, and then you have no idea where it's going to lead you. And I think your whole career journey is that exactly. I mean, when I first listened to just your story, I was amazed by Girl Scouts, nonprofits. How did you find out about oil and gas to then stepping away from that, starting your own business, which takes so much guts and risk? You're doing that to then realizing, hey, I did the entrepreneur thing. I want to go back to working for an organization, finding PISA, now Energy Workforce Technology Council, and then rising up and becoming president. I just think that your story is really incredible and so happy to have somebody like you running the organization and supporting all of the oilfield service companies, which we all work for. So I'm very appreciative of that. And thank you, Molly, for spending time with us today on Flipping the Barrel and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, leave us a comment, leave us a review. You can find everything on Flipping the Barrel on www.flippingthebarrel.com. You can find us on LinkedIn at Flipping the Barrel, on Instagram at Flipping the Barrel. So pretty easy to find us. We'd love to hear from you. And then also, if you have any comments or you have any recommendations for next guests, you can email us at flippingthebarrel@gmail.com. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode.